Monster Crown Sin Eater is Pokemon, Digimon or whatever other Mon style JRPG that got through Kickstarter campaign with total budget of around $50,000, so it's a small game with a small team of developers. It's an important thing to know not to expect Final Fantasy graphics and animations. Played the game for about 20 hours on the hardest difficulty, defeated 3 of 4 bosses from the main objective list and decided that I had enough, cause I have to move on to other games. So this is an early review, meaning not a full game review, minimal spoilers. Just reviewing those 20 hours I went through, so my opinion is subject to change, you nosy bastards. Monster Crown is a small open world JRPG that revolves around collecting many different monsters, fusing them into more powerful combinations, defeating powerful bosses, and that's about it. We are a brother from another mother. No, wrong story. We are a brother of a mysterious monster tamer that comes sporadically home to visit his family. This time around, he seems more urgent and mysterious than ever. As the game progresses, we start to find out more about the brothers' involvement in taking out Heavenly Kings, rulers of the land that serve some kind of purpose that we know nothing about. After taking them out one by one, we start to uncover pieces of the puzzle of how the world works. I was intrigued, even though I think I know how it would all end to a certain degree. Not that difficult to predict how the tables would turn, but I will not spoil what happened in 20 hours at all. It's a relatively interesting story with some lore behind it too. Don't know how it ends despite logical guesses, so can't really give a final score for it before experiencing it. So far it's alright, nothing incredible, but definitely not detrimental to the game. Characters are not bad either. Heavenly Kings are an interesting bunch and every one of them comes protected by Inquisitors who are, in my opinion, even more interesting. Unfortunately, except Nefer, no one gets an additional presence through the story, as these Inquisitors and Kings only appeared once, which is when the fight happened. Though what they were talking about prior to being beaten was an interesting insight in how they operate. Too bad others didn't get more appearances in, as I think there could have been interesting expansions on the story through these Inquisitors and Kings. Let's move on to the world of Monster Crown, divided by 4 regions with Heavenly King presiding over each. All regions have unique biome with their own monsters. Some of them have an interesting lore addition, like the Domingon village, where we interact with researchers investigating the lizard race. Each region has few dungeons with special monsters waiting at the end, and there's a huge spire in the middle of the map connected to the most important figure that presides over the whole world and is protected by Heavenly Kings. No one saw the Emperor, nor do people know what is he doing. Supposedly something important. Adds to the mystery, which I always appreciate. Searching for answers is an important part of every game with a story. World is quite small, but it really doesn't have to be bigger. It's got pretty much all you need. Plenty packs and chests to loot, filled with tons of different monsters, a couple dungeons here and there, unique monsters. So exploration is rewarding as it continuously unlocks new monsters and useful things like money, sleeping bags, insta level up berries, food. Defeating enemies doesn't give money or items, so finding loot in the world, selling monsters, selling items and defeating other tamers is the only way to get money and useful stuff for free. A typical economy mechanic that adds significance to loot found in the world. Thinking about it now, it doesn't really make much sense that the monsters don't drop materials, or something at least. But there's no crafting as far as I know outside of fusion and breeding. So it works well in the end. One thing I have to criticize is the fighting frequency. There's way too many insignificant fights. Monsters pop up way too often. I get that it's to rotate available monsters and give the chance to special monsters like the brilliant versions to pop up. But it becomes tedious quickly fighting so many monsters just to progress. It's really difficult to avoid them as they are literally everywhere, especially in dungeons. I think less monsters, but with some kind of scaling added to them, would mean less frequent, but more significant fights, with more experience gains per fight, so that less fights are needed to level up. Problem is that it gets very easy very quickly to deal with monsters on the map, so random fights become more of a nuisance instead of something exciting. Even more of a shame considering that combat has some depth to it. There's plenty of different types of abilities that allow tactical approach from different angles. On top of that, most abilities can be modified by using the synergy bar. For example, Steel Self ability negates all of the damage from the next hit, which makes it one of the best abilities versus bosses. Then there is something like Dragon Tackle, which increases resistance stat next to hitting the enemy. Crown version of that ability, meaning using synergy bar, consumes the buff and increases damage done based on the buff percentage. Plenty similar and completely different offensive and defensive moves, allowing interesting setups. Solid combat system. System in terms of tactics and effective abilities is tested against bosses, who are a mixed bag. Heavenly Kings basically kill every monster with one hit due to their special traits and whatnot. I thought at first how interesting these traits are that can make the fight so methodical. For example, against Jikokuten, a boss that kills everything with one shot due to his adaptive trait, which adapts the ability to the best matchup type. I thought that switching monsters of different type often in the fight would diminish the effectiveness of that trait, cause the boss would have to constantly play catch up with the adaptation. I also tried sucking out the synergy gauge entirely so it cannot use crowned moves that apply adept trait. Unfortunately, it turns out that boss can use crowned attacks even without the synergy, and that it can fuck you up whenever it wants. Very disappointing, cheap difficulty that diminishes the balance of the combat system and diminishes effectiveness of the abilities. There seems to be layers missing in the boss design that would lead to more interesting encounters. One-hit kills are not a creative and interesting way of making bosses hard, it's the opposite of that. Inquisitor bosses proved to be more balanced in terms of damage output, so it makes fights last at least, which opens up different tactical opportunities. Major part of every monster is the type. There are 6 types and it works like rock, paper, scissors in terms of who is better against who. Interesting bit is that attacks that the monsters come with can be of entirely different types to the monster type. Even more interesting is that fusing 2 monsters allows for an entirely different setup of attacks mixed from 2 monsters that the player can rearrange themselves. Fusion is fantastic. It's a crafting-like function that combines monsters where we choose genes from both monsters to make the end product better. Also, we can choose how the end product is going to look like with base look and pigment changes tied to monsters used. It's a system that elevates the game significantly and makes it far more interesting. This is how we create the ultimate monster. And then even the ultimate monster can be fused into something else. Endless enjoyment. There's tons of monster sprites. Think they said over 1,000, which is ridiculous. I love that. Some crazy designs that are ridiculous but also appealing. I don't think there will be many players fed up with how monsters look. However, there is a bit of a problem here. It depends on the player how they are going to look at it. Monsters come with a certain set of abilities, but these abilities come from a pool of abilities where every monster can have every ability. So the abilities that each monster has upon capture are not unique. Maybe few only are unique, but I don't know if I encountered a single one yet that is strictly tied to a specific monster. There are few unique abilities, I'm sure, but the vast majority of monsters have the same ability or two as the next captured monster. On top of that, the game has no real animations in combat when it comes to monsters performing the attack, and monster sprites are more like JPEG images than something more. So when combining those three things, none of the monsters really feel alive and unique. I understand that this is a small budget game and as such there was no money for some unique combat animations for each monster and some clash animations and such. So developers decided to offset that with a number of monster sprites. Fair enough, at least they did something to make it more interesting. Fact is that more life and uniqueness in terms of abilities and animations would add a lot to the game, but it's subjective to what degree that is going to affect your experience. Art style and music remind me of SNES era RPGs, which is nice. I'm sure many are going to appreciate that. Game has that appealing old school vibe to it. Summary of this early review is that Monster Crown Sin Eater is a solid monster leveler game. It has interesting story bits, compact world full of monsters, some interesting NPCs, occasional dungeon, good combat depth, tons of interesting looking monster sprites, incredible fusion mechanic that makes the game far better, but the game also suffers from tedium due to too many menial fights, there's distinct lack of life in monster sprites, and balancing of skills and encounters leave a lot to be desired. A solid game overall. Goes to show how a small budget combined with good vision can still create solid products. Would love to see what this studio could do with a couple millions in the budget. They would go nuts with monsters, and I'm sure add many things to make every monster feel alive and unique. Anyway, Patreon, subscribe, start merch in the description if that is of interest to you, and thanks for watching.